Over the past year and a half, I've been busy trying to fill the Pokemon-shaped void in my soul that was left by Scarlet and Violet. With SMT, 3DS games in general, Soulsborns, fighting games, you name it. And I feel like that definitely shows in the kinds of videos I've been making recently. And from these, it's easy to get the impression that all I do is complain about people playing Smelven Ring instead of obscure handheld RPGs. But I want to be perfectly clear. This video isn't going to be any different, because what's helped the most in filling that void has been Etrian Odyssey. Now, Etrian Odyssey is kind of a weird series. I wouldn't call it underrated because it's always been pretty comfortable with its spot as one of Atlus's other franchises. It's never gone for the same appeal or popularity as Mega 10 games. I wouldn't call it obscure either, since just last year we had the HD re-releases on modern consoles. Conceptually, it's a pretty basic character-creating, dungeon-crawling RPG where most of the fandom, if you can call it that, are online randos like me making these drawn-out video essays where we just talk about how much we like the game. But even with all those videos, do you know what I don't see talked about often? Etrian Odyssey Nexus, the most recent and probably final mainline entry into the series. I covered this one in my 3DS video last year and I just absolutely fell in love with it since then. The battle systems, the art style, the soundtrack, it's a late 3DS JRPG that nobody cares about, and you know I go crazy over those. Even with all the insane shit I was playing last year, this game still ended up being my favorite. I love this game to pieces, and I never hear anyone talk about it specifically. Most of those other channels either focus on the original trilogy or the series as a whole. I never see any love for Nexus. You know what other game I never see any love for? Etrian Odyssey 5, which came out a little over a year before Nexus. I picked the shit up immediately after finishing up Nexus, and again, I just completely fell in love with it. It's my favorite game I've played so far this year, other than Persona, that was better. But again, it's a relatively unknown entry in an already relatively unknown series, so I guess it's no wonder why not as many people are super vocal about this one. The purpose of this video is, literally, I'm just gonna be nerding out about these two games, okay? Because I think they deserve at least one video with some unhinged YouTube man just dorking out over them. I'm not gonna try and go into which one is better, it's Nexus, but I lump these games together for a lot of reasons. They were released and developed very close to each other. People usually describe 5 as the game the devs wanted to make, or the most modern Etrian Odyssey experience. Well, Nexus is what the fans wanted to have, or a greatest hits album, so to speak. They both came out after the remakes of the first 2 Etrian games, have got a shit ton of quality of life and aesthetic changes compared to their predecessors. Like, these are easily the best games in the series. Etrian Odyssey, in my opinion, is like a lot of long-running RPG franchises, where the further back you go, the worse things feel. I don't mean like, oh, the older games are more difficult and grindy, because it's RPGs, I expect that. More so, the classes aren't as unique or fun, shortcut paths aren't fucking visible on the map for some reason. Even in Etrian Odyssey 4, you hardly have any cool classes, the ones you do are unlocked later in the game. You couldn't run or quick travel to floors you've already made it through, so you have to retread the exact same steps every time you come back from a labyrinth. Golden Lair exists, like, hello, I'm fucking growing old here, my hair's turning gray. So this is the goat of goats. And the goat of this goat is the combat. Oh my God, this feels nice. I like a lot about these games, but this is easily my favorite feature. Move the fuck over, 5. We'll get to you later. I still love you, I promise. Mwah. 19 different classes in Nexus, with subclasses you get halfway through. A burst system that makes shit even more crazy, insane party synergy potential. God fucking damn, I need to keep my composure. I'm sweating a bit, I gotta open my door, I'm sorry y'all. So the first thing you should know about Nexus is it is a compilation title. It has labyrinths, music, characters, and classes from every previous Etrian Odyssey game, so every class except the new one, Hero, has been done before, but these are not just rehashes of old movesets, not by a long shot. There's not a single straightforward class in this game, and from what I've played, none of them feel like one-trick ponies. Yangus does damage, Yuna heals you and does summons, Rhine makes me fall asleep, fuck Xenoblade. Landsknecht has elemental linking moves to do repeated damage and hit weaknesses super hard, can buff itself with Vanguard so you hit even harder if you move first, attack and defense debuffs if you use a shield skill, and you can follow up with an even more powerful hit if the enemy is debuffed, and you've got 4 skills that increase your attack even more and nullifies damage, and you can subclass as anything you want. And you've still got 4 more party members after that. Holy shit. The sheer room for insane teams and creative freedom is unmatched. Sure, a lot of classes do focus on dealing damage, healing, or some other gimmick, but there's so many different ways you can incorporate those specialties together. I have never enjoyed team building in any game as much as I have in this one. Like, I look back at my Nexus party with the same fondness as I do with Pokemon teams I had when I was 12. Okay, are you guys ready for me to just go super turbo nerd over these guys? I'm really proud of Goon Squad Guild. I'm sorry, but I have to. Alright, so I already explained what Lanchneck does, links that cause a ton of elemental damage, along with shield skills that debuff stats and hit super fucking hard afterwards. Subclass her as an Imperial, so not only can you wield drive weapons, but also up your HP, status resistance, and TP recovery while raising your elemental attack. Tarimi just absolutely shits out damage. Electra, our Highlander, also shits out damage, sacrifices HP for insanely damaging spread moves, and also gets Spear Assist, which hits even harder after being powered up by Tarimi's links. Whenever you're not doing links, which was mostly the case later in the game, she gets Delayed Charge and Cross Charge, which when combined with your Force skills both heals the party and does quintuple digit damage. Jesus Christ. Black Sabbath is there too for additional emergency healing. Subclass is a hero for even more passive stat boosts in healing, and Fervor, which allows her to pass spines and ailments from her line onto herself, then heal them. And keeping those ailments off of our front line is important because next up is Jasper, our Sovereign. This is the most insane support class I've ever seen. Her order skills not only give massive buffs to an entire line, ranging from attack, defense, HP boost, whatever, you name it, but also heals while doing it. Also, thanks to Royal Dignity, which recovers HP whenever she gets hit once a turn, she's pretty much incapable of dying. You can also do fun stuff like dispel buffs for damage, imbue party members' weapons with elemental attributes, which is really helpful early game. Literally, this class does fucking everything. I subclassed her as a farmer for more labyrinth exploration perks. There's nothing else you could possibly want from your Sovereign. Now for the backline. Rox, our gunner, also does insane damage. Early on, he was my bind setter and also had multi-hitting Rapid Strike to activate Tarimi's links a bunch, also had emergency healing with Medic Bullet. Later on though, you get 4 different charge shot moves, 1 piercing and 1 of each element. This, along with Act Quick, which raises your act speed and lowers your TP cost of your next move, eliminates the temporary defense drop of your charge skills at the cost of a turn. And you can use those skills twice with multi-shot, and you have a chance to use those skills even more in one turn with your Force skills. Again, with the proper setup, you're doing 10k plus easy. Subclass him as a Night Seeker for higher damage to enemies suffering from ailments and even more chances to attack those enemies twice. Holy shit! And you're gonna be constantly inflicting those status ailments thanks to Nanashi, our Arcanist. Not named after this Nanashi. These guys are all named after OCs or shit from my Spotify. Status circles are insanely busted. Chances to poison, paralyze, or inflict panic every turn. Even more passive healing whenever a circle's up. Yes, please! Give it to me! You can also dispel circles for emergency healing or revival, or inflict group debuffs with Charm and Atrophic Eye. I subclassed her as a Harbinger for Miasma Armor, which increases your act speed and defense, and you can also dispel it for emergency healing or ailment removal. And if I wanted to, I could have gone for additional ailment susceptibility with Wilting Miasma, but I've got enough here already. Holy shit, I'm sweating. It is hot in this booth. This is the coolest party I've ever seen. Like, not to suck myself off, but how can you not love this? I didn't even plan for this. I just put together the classes I thought were cool and then used subclasses to fill the gaps. There are so many different ways these guys play off of their strengths and interact with each other. I'm just at a complete loss for words. And then on the other hand, you have 5, which, yeah, this one's okay. Yeah, it's pretty obvious that I like Nexus's battle mechanics more, but that's not to say that I dislike 5's, it's just less intense. 10 classes spread out among 4 different races with different stat growths, each one having fun gimmicks and not really locked down into a classic RPG archetype. Like the Botanist, your healer class, who can also sling debuffs to groups of enemies whenever they're not healing, or the Dragoon, your tank class, which sets up summonable bunkers to tank hits for your party. It's just that you don't have the creative insanity of subclasses, and it doesn't feel as easy to synergize your team's roles. Like, for the most part, Angel Eyes, Hatched, and Cossack are doing good amounts of damage with less setup than Goon Squad Guild, Soli is tanking with Wraiths, and Pommy is healing and debuffing. No real frills involved. It may not be as fancy as Nexus, and 5's classes definitely fall a lot closer to other RPG roles I can name off the top of my head, but each one has plenty of stuff that's unique. Make no mistake though, shit is still fire. Class mastery in this game replaces subclasses, and this shit is funny. It's basically just choosing which of your character's roles you want to hyper-focus on and make them completely busted. Like, you know your Masura who's already a glass cannon? What if you masterclassed as a blade dancer and can equip 4 katanas instead of armor and just killed everything? What if you did this and didn't give a fuck? So I said okay, and made all 3 of my attacking classes glass cannons and didn't bring a Dragoon because dedicated tank classes are kinda boring. Whoops. I think the reason why I struggled so much with 5 was because I was a little stupid. Shout out to Necromancer though, doesn't tank as well, but this is cool, this is very funny. Still, I really like the system too. Like every other game where they add some spin to these classes, it's just through subclasses. And with those, most of the skills you're going to be picking are passives that are complementary to what your dudes are already doing instead of combining these two roles per se. 5 lets you further specialize in one of your class's gimmicks. You're still focusing on a class's strengths in ways that are usually pretty unorthodox among RPGs. You also have stuff like a different burst system where your party members each spend their meter for different effects, which is fine, but not as cool as this. You also unlock these through race skills. Okay. Did they really have to be called that? Anyway, don't let my dooming fool you. Both of these games have top-notch combat. You can do so much shit and make party members that mesh together in such insane ways. It's just that 5 tries to be more refined in its party rules and how its classes grow over time, while Nexus boofs all the medicine in the cabinet, lights itself on fire, and starts screaming. Now that was a lot, but these battle mechanics are only half the fun. It's a dungeon crawler, so not only do you have to take into account battle stuff, but also solving puzzles and navigating tons of different areas. And to do this, we have to talk about one of the most unique and polarizing parts of Etrian Odyssey. Honestly, it's not that bad, having to draw your own map is fine. So the initial inspiration for Etrian Odyssey was those old school games where you had to make your own maps and have a little sketch pad next to your 4 billion year old monitor. And I think these days it's one of those things that feels at least a little vestigial, but really it's fine. It can be fun. Scribbling walls you've come across as you're getting into a battle, inching closer and closer to where you know a shortcut is, finding your own creative ways to make note of stuff. It takes a lot of getting used to, but it does kinda slap. Like, it's really up to you how in-depth you want it to be. You can just turn on full auto-mapping and nobody's gonna care, but you can also get funky with it. There's a lot of points throughout Etrian Odyssey that really challenge you to find a system that works for you. Like the 4th stratum of 5, there's this really kinda bullshit teleporting crystal maze, and you've gotta come up with a way to map out where each crystal is gonna take you, or which ones you should definitely avoid because they'll beam you back to the start, while keeping in mind that you're still gonna need your map to make sense on future visits. Having a visual indicator of your progress through each floor and expediting your routes through shortcuts is really fun. Even so, mapping isn't all you have to worry about in the labyrinths. Obviously, there are plenty of puzzles along the way too. Most of them involving FOEs, which are another one of my favorite gimmicks in the series. You know how a lot of games will just have random stealth sections that are usually just frustrating because the games weren't built with stealth in mind? Etrian Odyssey is one of the only non-stealth games that does stealth right, even though it only kinda counts as stealth. This is done through FOEs, basically these giant super enemies that have specific behaviors on the world map that are more or less impossible to beat on your first run through of an area. So you have to take their behaviors and movements into account to not enter a battle with them or get in their line of sight, and even if you do get pulled into a fight, you can try and run and probably have most of your party members die in the process. Either way, they pretty much force you to respect them or have your exploration completely halted. This shit is genius, dude. There are so many different FOEs too. Some turn invisible when they move, some you have to lure down into separate areas where they can't hurt you so you can pass, others only inch closer to you when you're in a battle. There are dozens of creative FOEs that Nexus and 5 throw at you. One of my favorites, for example, is the Platinum Pill Bug. At first, they're coiled up and can be walked on and pushed around, so you can use them to open new pathways by placing them in a specific place. But if you push them too many times, they'll awaken and start pursuing you. So you have to take into account how they could help you get past a roadblock and what you can do with them in a certain number of pushes. But once you're familiar with the gimmick, they start throwing new puzzles at you. Like, uh-oh, now there might be an FOE up on that race pathway that will freely chase you once you get up there. And then you gotta take that into account too. Then they add more and just holy shit. The way this game introduces puzzles through FOE behavior, then just keeps throwing new stuff at you so the puzzles never get stale is unreal. Like I said, there are tons of these things. Medusa trees, which are terrifying, sonar worms, which are susceptible to instant kill and can be used to make overpowered wraiths, headless hunters, which behave differently if it's night or day, Taurus demons who, yo, wait, bro, you're not in this fucking game, get out of here! There's just so much cool shit in these labyrinths that sometimes you forget you're staring at the same 3DS tile sets for 90 hours and that the game isn't that impressive graphically. Like, you don't even have any player models you get to control. The game is in first person, and your party members are represented by a single sprite that you look at when it's their turn in battle. Even Eoris and Magenia, who cares? Your hub areas in these games are just menus. All of the shops and everything. You can't walk around in any of it. Which, the last time we brought up menus that were like that, it definitely wasn't positive, but even so, these feel like places that are actually lived in. taking quests from the shopkeepers, smirking at Mr. Merlin every time I go to save in Nexus, hearing one of Janetta's goofy voice lines, checking in on Edgar. Oh, wait, he's married, never mind. I don't know. It's another one of those things that hit this real sweet spot for me. Both the theming of the labyrinths themselves, but also how the artwork and look of your hub areas feel so serene and refreshing and real, despite not being that complex. Of course, most of the aesthetic and design praise that I have is for the music. Now, the music is like... Wait, did you actually think I was done being a nerd? Strap the fuck in, I haven't even started! It is an absolute crime that I hardly ever hear anyone praising the soundtracks of these two games. This shit is immaculate! There is so much energy and power and life in V and Nexus's music. So much of the theming and general feel of these games are attributed to Yuzo Koshiro's back-to-back-to-back masterpieces. Even though a lot of the songs in Nexus are just brought over from past games, they still capture the entire series' mood perfectly. When you're going through Petal Bridge and the game hits you with the remix from Etrian Odyssey 2 Untold, this shit is nice. It's such a gorgeous theme for an incredibly gorgeous area. That's not to say the Nexus original tracks aren't goated too. When I was first starting this game, the second I heard the World Shrine theme in the first labyrinth, hearing that somber violin kick in, that's when I knew I was in for something special. The hub themes for both games, both the day and night versions, are just wonderful. There's such an immense feeling of safety and hominess to the daytime themes. Even coming back to these games months later, it immediately makes me feel like, yeah, hey, I miss this place. And then for the nighttime theme, the sax starts to go insane, like you're coming back to the city at 1 a.m., half of your party is critically injured and you're just soaked with blood. Fuck the labyrinth, dude, let's go see some strippers. So Nexus has original tracks from the remakes of Etrian 1 and 2, and tracks from 4 and 5. But what about 3? 3 never really got a modern remake with redone music, so the soundtrack isn't orchestral like 4 onwards. But instead of just using music from like Etrian Mystery Dungeon or the Super Arrange, the fucking Chad said, alright, let's not just remix 3's tracks, but also add new sections where they just go fucking nuts! Don't think I'm leaving 5 out of the mix this time though. Grasp the Future, which is your second battle theme that you heard at the start of this section, is easily my favorite track in this entire franchise. There's just so much oomph. The orchestra, the dude shredding, the fucking sax coming in. Everything just flows together so well and just culminates into this Sailor Moon-ass masterpiece. That's not the only reason I like this track though. Etrian games do this thing where once you're a few stratums in, pretty much at the canonical point where NPCs are like, hey, you're kinda based as shit, like you've gone further in the labyrinth than anyone else and everyone in the city is rooting for you. And to celebrate, you'll get a more intense, more mature sounding battle theme. Like, your initial themes are still cool, but there's always that air of, these are just little baby adventurers getting killed by frogs. Give them a baby theme. But then they hit you with this shit. I get that a lot of games do this, but it's such a fun sign of your progress. I love 5's first battle theme too, but Grasp the Future just takes that to the extreme. It's just this perfect build-up, the repeat of the motifs, the sax and guitar that just keeps going and going, and then it just drops. Pretty good. The final boss theme for 5, Challenge of the Stars, is a whole different beast entirely. Like the game throws its own rules out the window and just hits you with this low, droning chant as this fucking thing rips into you turn after turn. For 3 straight minutes, this is all you hear. It's such an immense buildup. Like that orchestra that was cheering you on and pushing you forward has just vanished, and all that's left is this deep, guttural anxiety. And right as you've lost all hope, both the hope of winning this battle and actually hearing a good final boss theme, that triumphant orchestra finally starts to come back. What the hell are you falling asleep for, man? The last song I'm gonna geek out over does the exact same thing, and it's such a wonderful introduction to my favorite labyrinth in the entire series. Just seeing that gorgeous artwork slowly fade in as you realize that the final area, the Untamed Garden, is just a forest. Like the first one you traveled through at the start of your adventure. And as it slowly builds for almost 2 straight minutes, you're wondering to yourself, is this it? Is the game almost over? Do I want this game to end? And then it's such a haunting theme, perfectly coupled with this peaceful yet wrong feeling area. It's so beautiful and sad and weird. It perfectly matches the feeling of trudging up through this endless, hellish labyrinth and suddenly being thrust into this oddly magical Garden of Eden. There's this insane sense of finality, like, this is it, baby. End of the line. Which one of us are going to be walking away from this alive? It's probably not going to be you, Sully, so look the fuck out. I could probably ramble on about the Untamed Garden and this track in particular for an hour straight, because this shit is really good. But I won't do that. I'm not doing it. I'm not shifting into sad video essay climax mode for this video, but I am gonna get close. So let's close this video out with another one of the most polarizing things about Etrian Odyssey in general, and why, honestly, I might like it even more than the combat. How it handles its story, or lack thereof. Now, I know a lot of the things I've talked about today have been rehashed from my 3DS videos, and that's gonna be especially true here, but please bear with me. Etrian games are extremely light on story. This is done on purpose. There are no huge cutscenes, hardly ever any godlike major antagonists you're chasing for most of the game, no concrete characterization for your party. There's development, for sure. NPCs become more acquainted with your guild's achievements, there are quests that follow other characters' growth throughout the game, but it's miles off from the story structure of what we think of as modern RPGs. In 5, they literally info-dump to you about the final boss, what it is, and why you've been brought here to slay it at the door to the boss room. Admittedly, that's pretty shitty, honestly. But even if it's not stated explicitly in-game, Etrian Odyssey is a series that thrives off of how much you put into it. That goes for not just the maps or your teams, but how your imagination and your input shapes the canon, along with what your guild members are like. This has always been the general attitude the developers put into this game. Again, it's inspired by those super old games that required you to use your imagination, because there were a lot of gaps to fill in here. And while not everyone may like that, I really do. If I had one recommendation for anyone who wanted to get into the series, it would be, don't be afraid to have fun with this. Seriously, actively try not to hold yourself back. Don't be afraid to get goofy with your own characterization of your team. How much you're willing to put into it plays a big part into how much you're going to enjoy this game. I'm going to be super vulnerable for a bit. I don't talk about it here because this channel is my space to talk about video games, but I love creating and designing characters. I love coming up with outfits and their backstories and relationships. If you knew how many Danganronpa OCs I had, you'd shit your britches. All right? Cringe culture is dead. Fuck off. I love writing too. For both my Nexus and 5 parties, I went out of my way to pump out some AO3 bullshit about how they came together and how their respective guilds were formed and what they're looking for in the labyrinths. It's not good. I'm taking a big risk even sharing a section of this because I know I'm not a good writer. I don't share this stuff, but it doesn't matter. I made this for me. And I really enjoyed having that base to build my characters upon, then having those characters evolve as I went through the game. If you're down, if you're into that creative shit like I am, I recommend doing something like that too. Don't be afraid of making it weird or not making something that's good. Who cares? This is for you. Even coming up with some running canon in your head as you're making your way through the game helps a lot. If the Sandy Barons are kicking your ass or you forgot an Ariadne thread, you're definitely going to be pissed, but how pissed would your guild be in that situation? It's not like you're on your own though. I said it in the last video, but the games give you plenty of motivation and egging on through explore log events or goofy dialogue choices. I fucking love these labyrinth events, dude. Not only do they give you a chance to flex your creative muscles, that sounds kind of cringe, but also break up the labyrinth with fun dialogue, rewards, or surprise battles. There's one in particular, towards the end of 5, that really stuck with me. So as you're nearing the end of the game in the Untamed Garden, there's an event where you just come across a random cat chillin'. And it's like, this is an alien forest filled with giant ants and evil stone horses. What is a regular fucking cat doing here? And the game gives you the option to play with the cat. If you say yes, it picks a random party member to pet it and play with it, completely ignoring the rewards or EXP you get. Just the mental image I had in my run of this tragic party willingly marching towards what they assume to be their deaths, confronted with a normal cat out of nowhere. And solely this Frankenstein carcass created to be a living weapon who's our resident shorty doomed by the narrative, just getting that last moment of normalcy, of respite in the most unexpected place. It's such a small thing, and it's such a weird thing for me to fixate on and bring up like 6 months after I played it. And I bet nobody else who's played this game is gonna have a moment identical to that in that specific spot, but that just means there's gonna be some other part of the Etrian Odyssey experience that's gonna stick with you in the same way that sticks with me. So, fuck it! Go nuts with it! The Goon Squad Guild and the Quarry Guild have been elevated to S-tier blorbos in my head because I was willing to play around with them the way I did. I feel like this is something that a lot of people talking about Etrian Odyssey tend to miss, like they admit the stories aren't well developed and then stop there. Not that I don't blame them, it's not like the game can outright say, use your imagination lol in a text box, but even so, it's still in the spirit of the game. Like, I did some digging, don't ask why, but on the Etrian Odyssey subreddit, years ago they used to have these weekly headcanon prompt threads where they'd give out these prompts and then you could just talk about your dudes. That's really fun, I love that. It makes me a little sad that the same creative-focused attitude hasn't been too present in the marketing for the more recent releases, because that's something I really value about these games. You could probably tell, but having something like this judgment-free space to craft a story as the game goes along, was really something. Okay, nerd time is over, for real, I promise. I hope you're coming out of this with a good idea of why I love V and Nexus, and why I'm so miffed that they aren't more widely celebrated in general. Sure, they're not perfect, far from it. I'm really bad at titling my videos, but it is incredible just how many perfect moments there are. And I don't think it's just the nostalgia of it being a 3DS game that's making me feel this way. But even so, having this set up with the map on the bottom screen for your whole playthrough just feels right. The remaster's cramming everything onto one screen just feels wrong in a way. But still tip, playing this game with the drawing tablet feels pretty nice, honestly. Regardless, these games are incredible. As someone who, as you know, is a huge snob when it comes to these kinds of games, there's no question that V and Nexus are among the best RPGs I have played in a while. And I know that I may have given the impression that I don't like V as much as Nexus, but this game is still fantastic. It really does feel like the culmination of everything Etrian Odyssey. Sure, it has your standard 30-floor labyrinth and comparatively average pool of classes, but by this point in the series, everything has been refined to near perfection. There are so many top-tier locales and original songs in this one. Untamed Garden alone puts this game at 5 stars for me. And while the classes seem simple, there's just so many crazy gimmicks with each one. Just thinking about classes I didn't use in my initial run, like Harbinger or Dragoon, makes me want to start up a new file to see what it's like to not have your glass cannons completely die each turn. But like I said, there's issues. Of course there are. A lot of the bosses have some weird difficulty spikes, you don't have the same insanity of Nexus subclass systems, and race skills leave quite a bit to be desired. Still though, it's good. It's really good. If you're looking for a more traditional dungeon crawling experience that still manages to feel fresh and modern, boom, there you go. Nexus, on the other hand, is a whole different beast. Yes, it lends practically its entire identity to its predecessors and recycles almost all of its content, but you just can't match the creative freedom you have in this game. The single most insane and in-depth party building I've ever seen in a video game. And there's just so many different labyrinths and quests and things to do that it's almost overwhelming. It's a little too long. Like, it could definitely be 2 or 3 labyrinths shorter and be even better. And it probably won't hit the same if you're playing this as your first entry. You're not going to be constantly going, oh, I remember that. That's not a deal breaker, though. I started with this game. You know how much I love it. Jesus Christ. Probably the biggest weakness with both of these games, though, is that they'll just ruin the previous entries for you with how good they are. I mentioned just how janky everything from 4 backwards is earlier, but going from 5 to the HD remaster of 1 is like, what the fuck? Am I in the Paleolithic era where they haven't invented fun yet? So if that's an issue, start with 4. It's still pretty alright, not alright enough to make a whole video about though. It's not that big a deal, even though they're pretty different in terms of mechanics and what they're trying to do. I hope you get why I've grouped these games together so heavily. I hate being this nostalgia-riddled YouTube gamer, but most games just don't hit like this anymore. I definitely disagree with my old stance that everything after this era is bad, and yeah, I've loved some recent stuff that's come out, but they just don't have the same exact flavor as these do, if that makes sense. Etrian Odyssey hits this weird middle ground where, yeah, technically it's a big, well-known RPG series by a AAA company, but that isn't how it holds itself. Maybe it's because it is an SMT, or because it's a handheld game, but there's just something so captivating in how simple it is, and how it sincerely asks you to meet it halfway when it comes to the story. And what makes these two games even more captivating is how instead of being like most other super late 3DS games that were just like, fuck it, nobody cares anymore, nobody's gonna buy it to some degree, this is where they brought their A game. This is where they practically perfected everything that makes this series good. Maybe it's because they knew that the franchise wouldn't feel the same on the Switch without easy access to the map that's been a staple of this series. Or at this point, their other franchises were too huge, or... Nah, actually, I'm just gonna stop myself there. No more Mr. Sad, wistful YouTube content, man. 5 and Nexus, go fucking hard. All these other games ain't shit. Literally stop what you're doing right now. Go play these games. Go. Go. I said get out of here!